Greetings, my scattered sisters and brothers in the Lord. Trust you know the Lord is with you wherever you find yourself scattered today, and that you know that His presence with you is more than enough for whatever you might face today. We're rejoining Jesus, Mark chapter 7, beginning at verse 31. And you'll remember that Jesus was in Tyre, and He healed the daughter of the Syrophoenicianite woman, and now Jesus is on His way back towards the Sea of Galilee. So Mark chapter 7, verse 31. Then Jesus left the vicinity of Tyre and went through Sidon down to the Sea of Galilee and into the region of the Decapolis. Just a quick note, the Decapolis was a league of 10 Greek cities. And there were Jews in the area, but it had kind of been colonized, this territory. It's on the east side of the Jordan. And so there's a lot of Greeks living there. Verse 32. There some people brought to him a man who was deaf and could hardly talk, and they begged Jesus to place his hand on him. After he took him aside, away from the crowd, Jesus put his fingers into the man's ears. Then he spit and touched the man's tongue. He looked up to heaven and with a deep sigh said to him, Ephphatha, which means, be opened. At this the man's ears were opened, his tongue was loosened, and he began to speak plainly. Jesus commanded them not to tell anyone, but the more he did so, the more they kept talking about it. People were overwhelmed with amazement. He has done everything well, they said. He even makes the deaf hear and the mute speak. And so there's a few things we want to note here. First, again, we see the authority of Jesus to bring healing, to grant healing. And so the man was deaf, he could hardly speak, and Jesus put his fingers in the man's ears and spit and touched his tongue, and then Jesus gave the command, be opened, and the man was cured. He was able to hear and he was able to speak clearly. And so we see the authority of Jesus to heal, and we see that Jesus restores this man. So that's the first thing we see, is this incredible authority of Jesus, and indeed the crowd remarks, Jesus does all things well. The second thing I want us to think about is also maybe the lesson in the miracle. It's really interesting to me that, he couldn't hear and he could hardly speak. And then when Jesus opens his ears and loosens his tongue, now he hears and he speaks plainly, he speaks clearly. And I kind of think there's a connection here, and we have seen this in terms of John Mark's development too, that your ability to hear impacts your ability to speak, and to speak plainly, to speak clearly. And we are just recognizing in this miracle that he didn't hear well, and so he didn't speak well. And as Jesus healed his hearing, is like his speech was healed as well. What was the command Jesus gave? Be opened. And it's like the ears were open. Jesus taking his fingers and sticking them in the man's ears. It's like Jesus was symbolically opening the man's ears, and that loosened his tongue. So here's the thought. How well are you speaking? Maybe you don't speak well. Maybe I don't speak well because I'm not hearing well. And maybe the key to hearing well is actually Jesus opening our ears. And I don't mean to simply kind of spiritualize this miracle, but I think with every miracle, there is a lesson. And it seems to me that it's a miracle to be able to hear especially the Lord, to be able to hear God. And we can't really hear God on our own. It takes a miracle for us to hear God. It takes God's grace to open our ears that we could begin to hear. And the better we hear, the more clearly we speak. Just think for a moment. When you have all kinds of negative stuff coming into your ears, what tends to come out of your mouth? Yeah, negative stuff. But when all kinds of positive stuff is going into our ears, we tend to speak a lot more positively. Well, if we're going to speak godly, then we need our ears to be open to God. And that takes a miracle. And so my prayer for you, my prayer for me, wherever we find ourselves scattered today, is that Jesus would kind of pierce our ears, not ear piercings, but that Jesus would put his fingers in our ears and open them up so that we can actually hear. We can hear the Spirit speaking to us. We can hear God talking to us. And then in that, we would find ourselves actually speaking a whole lot better too. That we're able to speak words of encouragement, we're able to speak words of love, we're able to speak words of blessing because our ears have been opened. We can hear God. And so wherever you find yourself scattered today, that's my prayer for you, that your ears would be open, that you could speak well. God bless. Hear well today, speak well today by the touch of Jesus.